Well, may the 4th be with you, Dave. May the 4th be
May
with
the
you.
fourth be with you.
Exactly. Welcome to our May the 4th Star Wars special here on the Galactic Core podcast. I am joined by the absolutely amazing, the Force blood of the Why So Sidious crew. It is David Cochran. Welcome to the show, Dave. Welcome to the May the 4th special.
Oh, thank you, Andy. It's a pleasure and an honor to be invited onto such a special occasion. So, thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Well, we are both absolute Star Wars fans. We do know this. We've had plenty of chats about it in the past. So, and what a better time to get together and then chat, for May the 4th be with us all. So we've got a really good episode lined up. We are going to be chatting about top 5 scenes in all of Star Wars. I know this was a really hard list for us to put together. We even chatted about a top 3 and went, no, there's no way you can do a top 3. It's got to be at least a top 5, if not a top 20. I don't think we've got 3 hours to go through that. So we've narrowed it down to a top 5 each. And we're going to just be chatting in general about what it is we love about Star Wars. The fact that, for 40 years or so, it's captivated, or longer than that now, isn't it? That it's captivated people. Just the stories itself, even the music that goes with it, as we've just been listening to, and I know it's a special time of year for you as well, because May the 4th is when you got married, I believe.
It is a very special time of year indeed. It already was, again, because of Star Wars, and Star Wars has been a big part of my life since I was a child, because of my oldest brother. He was a big fan, and he led the way for our family, and we became Star Wars people. And thankfully enough, my wife was willing. Well, she was a Star Wars person too, actually. Her family liked Star Wars, watched it, and lucky enough for me, she acquiesced to having our marriage on May the 4th. And we even walked down to the ceremony. No, we walked away to the A New Hope victory ceremony song, and we had the Cantina Band song for our cocktail hour. We had 5 or 6 Star Wars soundtracks in that wedding, so I'm a lucky man, and it's a happy time of year for me.
So when you walked out at the end of the ceremony, it was the medal ceremony music, was it?
Yep. Yep.
I had the exact same thing. Me and my wife walked out to that music.
No.
We had an honor guard of lightsabers that we walked out to with the A New Hope Episode 4 medal ceremony music.
It's just the perfect music. It's the perfect song for that occasion. And smart man.
Yeah, we had some friends there with the lightsabers you see behind me, creating a little guard of honor.
Oh,
and just
awesome.
walked down the aisle out of the ceremony to that music. Fantastic stuff.
Beautiful.
Well, welcome everyone to this May the 4th special. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Galactic Core Podcast. Here to review the latest films and TV shows from all your favorite intergalactic universes. Now, it's time to get your geek on. Please welcome your host, the prophesized chosen one. It's Andy.
What about you, Dave? What brings your love of Star Wars out?
Oh man, I don't know, so much. I mean, I became a big Star Wars fan right off the bat. My oldest brother was a massive Star Wars fan. He read the Legends books, all that good stuff. So he set me off on the right path. And it's just, I don't know if it's just how it takes you out of reality and puts you into a world you'd rather live in, or the Force and the lightsaber action and everything else that goes in between the classic hero journey that gets followed in Star Wars. It's just a feel good. It's just a feel good story every time. I don't know. And there's just so much magic that goes throughout it. And it's been expanding for so many years. And yes, there's been a lot of rough points, but it's still cranking out some amazing stuff. Some absolutely tear jerking, goosebump giving type scenes that have been coming out in just some recent media. So it's definitely not dead, despite what some haters may say. The magic's still there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I never understand these people like, Star Wars is dead. I'm like, how is it dead? It's alive and well, to be fair. So,
You can have missteps without dying.
Yeah. I mean, almost any franchise, especially a long-term one, is going to have missteps along the way. It's a struggle to think of any that don't have a few down points here and there. I mean, you can actually verify this because I was just thinking in my head, it's like, oh, what franchises are big ones that maybe haven't had too many missteps? And Lord of the Rings sort of popped in my head. And I know you're a big Lord of the Rings fan, so you can maybe compare. But at the same time, my wife is a huge Lord of the Rings fan, and she isn't a fan necessarily of the Hobbit films.
Yep.
She loves the original films, but the Hobbit films she's not necessarily a huge fan of. So even there, maybe there's a little bit.
Yeah, I'm with her.
Almost gave
I'm
it
with
too much
her.
credit.
Yeah, I didn't think the Hobbit movies were not that good. So,
But in terms of Star Wars, what was the first Star Wars film you saw at the cinema?
the first Star Wars, it was the Phantom Menace. Yep. No,
really?
I was 7. I was 7 when it came out. So I know I don't remember all
You
of
young, gorgeous bastard.
it. But I do remember going to it, and I remember all the promos behind it. Oh my gosh, all the Pepsi cans and everything
yeah.
with all the different characters. Even Shmi was on Pepsi cans coming before that movie dropped. So that was definitely my first.
I remember, I mean, I'm a little bit older than you, just a little bit. I think I was, what was I, 15 when The Phantom Menace came out?
Okay.
But I remember them re-showing some of the original trilogy ones in cinemas when I was a kid, because I was born at the end of 1983, so just after the original trilogy had stopped coming out. But I remember them re-showing some of them in the cinema and re-seeing, I think Return of the Jedi was the first one I technically saw in the cinema, because they did sort of a re-showing when I was younger. But interestingly, I was on holiday in Florida in 1999, the same week that The Phantom Menace came out. And I begged my mum to let me go to the cinema to watch it, and so she didn't give a crap about Star Wars, so she forced my stepdad to take me to go and watch it in the cinema. And I remember being absolutely, obviously, enamored with it. First Star Wars film in so long. I remember buying a bunch of toys to bring back over to the UK as well. But the issue was, back in those days, so we're talking obviously 1999. Back then, films that came out in the US wouldn't come out in the UK for like another 3 to 6 months. So when I came back to the UK, I wanted to talk to, obviously back in those days, it took months for like films to travel around the globe, so to speak, and it always was in America 6 months before the UK. I remember going back home with all my toys and stuff, having seen the film, wanted to talk to all my friends about it, and they were like, "Don't you dare spoil this film for us. Like, you utter a word about this film to us and we will beat the crap out of you." So for like, I think 3 or 4 months, I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone about this film, having just happened to be on holiday the same week it came out, and then not being able to talk to anyone about it. So, and then episode 2, I remember went to like a midnight viewing. It's probably the first midnight viewing I went to of any film. In 2002, there was like a big thing going on at a local cinema, like a local radio station was there, all dressed up, interviewing people about it and going out to see it. And seeing Yoda walk out and get to fight for the first time was obviously a big thing as well. And Revenge of the Sith, I was super annoyed because I spent most of my career as a chef. And in 2005, I was at like the height of my career. And I just didn't have time to get to the cinema. I used to work like 100 hours a week. I just did not have time to get to the cinema to watch Revenge of the Sith, unfortunately. So it took me a little while to watch Revenge of the Sith. But in terms then of, say, the prequels and the sequels, obviously, I'm assuming you've been to the cinema to see all of those when they came out.
Yeah.
What was your favourite sort of cinema-going experience to watch any of those films?
Prequels and sequels?
Out of all those 6 films, and I suppose you can throw Rogue One and Solo in there as well, but what was your favourite experience of going to the cinema for which film?
I would say Revenge of the Sith, but I think I'm going to go Rogue One. And that's only because Revenge of the Sith, I was only 13 at that point. And so I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I was a freaking massive fan of it. Played the video game the same of the following movie. That game was pretty solid for being based straight off a movie. Loved it, but I don't think I was able to appreciate it as much. When I saw Rogue One, I wasn't expecting it to be as insanely good as it was, and I had no idea the Vader hallway scene was coming. So I think that movie really brought more emotion out of me, just because I think I was too young for Revenge of the Sith to really get all the emotion. I was just like, that was awesome. But Rogue One really blew me away. But Revenge of the Sith is my favorite movie. But the theatrical experience first time, Rogue One.
Fair. I think for me, I think the experience and the build up to it, and then getting to the cinema itself, it was probably The Force Awakens for me. Because, so I was like a teenager and going into sort of like young adult when the prequels came out, and maybe I didn't. Whilst I had obviously excitement going to them, because the prequels are coming out, it didn't feel like it had been as long as a wait for me for maybe older people going from the original trilogy to the prequels. So they had to wait obviously like 16 years.
Right.
But for me, going from there and then going from Revenge of the Sith, where my love for Star Wars grew over those 10 years from Revenge of the Sith to The Force Awakens coming out, the build up to announcing that obviously there was going to be a new Star Wars film after 10 years, and Disney have now bought Lucasfilm, and all the anticipation, the trailers when they came out. Don't you remember that first trailer when it came out, and the music that John Williams did for it? Halfway through, it kind of kicks into the main Star Wars theme, and it was just so exciting and emotional. And then getting there on the night, and seeing the cinema packed out for this midnight viewing, the biggest screen in my local cinema. Some people dressed up and having their lightsabers and stuff, and me and my best friend going along, and it was just phenomenal. Forget about what you think about the film in general, but just that experience, or even the fact that you're seeing some of our characters return. Han Solo dying in the film, which was pretty emotional for me. I'm not necessarily the biggest Han fan, but at the same point, I'm like, this is one of the OGs, and I've just seen him get killed off on screen. I'm like, you bastards! So. No matter how much Harrison Ford wanted to die, I was like, don't kill you off.
Yeah, that's a good point, though. That anticipation was wild, and that was definitely more build up than Rogue One. I think if anything, I would just say maybe the reason I lead Rogue One is because walking out of that theater, I had a new revived, like, oh, Star Wars it's here. Like, that is holy crap. I can't wait to see what they do next coming out of that Rogue One thing. But yeah, you're right. The Force Awakens hype was pretty wild.
I think they almost shot themselves in the foot, because you had all that hype from The Force Awakens. And whether you think of it as a rehash of A New Hope or not doesn't really matter. It was still a decent enough film.
Yeah.
And then obviously all the excitement and chatter that still goes on after it's come out, and the talking about the film itself, and the renewing of the franchise. And you follow that the next year with Rogue One, which in itself is an amazing one-off film. Like even without the Vader hallway scene, it's a really good film, and it just sets up everything obviously is needed. And then obviously throwing that scene in as well. I'm sure we might get to that in a little bit from our discussion topic today. But I
don't know.
But also just then, everything that comes. I just love everything that comes after it in terms of there. But then, obviously, when you get the three films that followed those two films, I think you end up with two good films followed by three iffy at best films in terms of Episode 8, Episode 9, and Solo. So it's about. But since, unfortunately, you couldn't make it for our anniversary episode, and I obviously got to ask your counterparts about it, why don't you tell us what your best and worst... I'm pretty sure I know what your best is, but what your best and worst Star Wars films?
Yes, so best is Revenge of the Sith. That one's going to take it. It's just... I mean, it's just iconic. I could rewatch it constantly. I can probably quote that thing from start to finish. I've watched it so many times. It's just peak Star Wars. It is what it is.
Yeah.
My worst is it's going to be the movie right before it. It's not in the sequels. It's Attack of the Clones. I can rewatch that movie, and every time it ends, I'm like, yeah, wasn't that good? Like, I find myself just finding so much stuff like unenjoyable, or just like critiquing it constantly. Even the Count Dooku versus Anakin thing I have issues with the choreography of that fight scene. I love the Yoda versus Dooku scene was awesome. Especially seeing that in theaters. That was freaking awesome. And seeing the Jedi run in the Coliseum together for the first time, that many Jedi in one shot, that was cool. But that's about it. The rest of it, it's like, oh God, this is bad. I can't. I enjoy The Last Jedi more on a rewatch. Even Rise of Skywalker, I enjoy on a rewatch at least. I can't stand watching Attack of the Clones.
Interesting. You would have been the only person that would have come up with that answer for the worst. I mean, as we know, JD hates The Last Jedi, so that was definitely on his one. The overwhelming film that came out of it, though, in terms of the worst from that particular night, actually was Solo. To be fair,
and that's
more people
that's
voted
wild
for
because
Solo.
I kind of
And I
like
voted for
Solo.
I voted for Solo as my worst film.
I know.
mean, I always joking with Clan Brandalorian that I despise that film so much. Like, obviously, I'm going through my reviewing every bit of Star Wars at the moment. I'm up to the end of the prequels at the moment, and I'm dreading the episode when I've got to do Solo because I'm like, let me try and find some positive things to say about it, so I'm not just teabagging it for like an hour and a half. But yeah, I'm going to be struggling when it comes to that one. It's just, yeah, we're here to celebrate Star Wars Day, not talk shit about it. So we'll move on from that one. I guess the big question is, I mean, we touched on it briefly already, but what is it about Star Wars that just draws you back in? Because we talk about obviously the emotion of it, the classic battle between like the light and the dark, the good and the bad. This, I guess, new interpretation of like magic from stories being the Force and stuff like that. But all of these things, I guess, contribute to it. But what is it really that what nails down for you personally that just draws you back into Star Wars and keeps you loving it?
There's a lot of stuff. Again, there's just the magic behind all of it. Honestly, without John Williams, I think John Williams is a big part of coming to love Star Wars because score, soundtrack, music, emotion, that plays a massive part in bringing these things to life. And John Williams did that. So I think you have to bring him up when you talk about it. But it's just the magic of the universe. And one of the biggest things, though, is the complexities of the Jedi and Sith. Which is interesting because the Sith weren't even really a thing for the original trilogy. But what it's grown to be, what they've really come to be at this point, and just the parallels and how many things that they have in common, but how the other half of it are yin and yang, and just seeing the dynamics of these characters being raised in these two faiths, these opposites. I think that's one of my favorite aspects of Star Wars that brings me back into new stories, that gets my hopes up for the Acolyte. Dangerous hope. I'm a little nervous, but my hope is up because of that aspect behind it. I think that's the standout part of Star Wars. But at the base of it, it's just the magic behind it, the storytelling, and just the feeling that John Williams can evoke in a simple project and a simple scene, what he can bring out of me.
It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, it's not exactly a new thing that music changes the mood of something, but my God, that man is unbelievable.
It's incredible.
Like him and Hans Zimmer, I think, have to be two of the greatest modern composers, especially for film history, or probably the best two composers in film history anyway. The emotion and the feelings those two evoke. Because I just have to listen to a piece of music to get excited about Star Wars. I don't even necessarily need to watch the film or anything like that. So it's... I mean, that piece of music I played at the start, obviously, that was technically from the Rise of Skywalker final trailer, but just the sort of the feeling of emotion that rises through me when I hear that, it's unbelievable, really, the effect that has, and it's definitely led and enhanced some of the iconic scenes. I mean, I think the first one that springs to mind is probably Phantom Menace. When Maul appears and lights up his double-sided lightsaber for the first time, and the music, to Duel of the Fates, kicking in. Yeah. Unbelievable, the chills you get from something like that, just from a guy like lighting up a saber.
Well, and you said that, and I'm not kidding. The chorus of the opera kicked right in my head, and him igniting the double blade ignited in my head as soon as you just said those words. I mean, it was automatic, just hearing the score and seeing that image, and it's just burned into your brain because it's just that iconic.
I mean, it's hard to think of what Star Wars would be without John Williams. You can't even comprehend it, really, can you? So, big shout out to JW on his contribution to Star Wars on that front. But why don't we get into what we're going to be chatting about today? So, top 5 scenes in all of Star Wars. This is a hard list to put together. We were chatting just before we started, and I was like, originally I'd gone, let's do top 3, and you were like, I was like, maybe it's expand it a bit because top 3's hard as it is, and I was like, yep, fine, top 5, and sat there, and this was far more difficult than I anticipated. So I know that we both got honourable mentions. We'll do that at the end, just in case, either of us have got an honourable mention in our own top 5. But I have these in no particular order as well, because I don't think I could even quantify these into like a 5-to-1 situation without needing a good couple of years to do that. So, so we'll just do, this is a top 5 in no particular order. So Dave, hit us with your first one.
Yeah, so we already mentioned it a little bit, so we might as well throw out there, no fanfare for this one. The hallway scene in Rogue One has to make it into my top 5 all-time Star Wars scenes. And I know it's, pretty generic of a pick, because probably, the majority of Star Wars fans would probably put it up there, but I'm not going to let that take it out of there. It was incredible. It was unexpected in an age now where we don't get unexpected things like that. We would have had leaks something about Vader will show up. Rumors are Vader's are showing up towards the end with a crazy scene that will match this scene. Like, we would have got some news drop like that. We didn't get that. It came out of nowhere for me. And it was just, after seeing Vader, such a cool and imposing figure, even while being so slow in the original trilogy and his fight scenes and everything. He was still imposing, but obviously he wasn't the most nimble and acrobatic. Seeing him just tear through this hallway with no sweat, the way he used the Force with ease with the flick of his wrist and cut through. I mean, it was just bottling up what Vader could be at his peak as Darth Vader, and we got to see it on the big screen. It's just,
Yeah, I mean, I'm there with you. I mean, I pull no punches about the fact that I don't care if it's like a generically, what's the word I'm looking for? A generically accepted among Star Wars that this is like a big scene. Like, it doesn't matter to me. This is top 5 scenes, Dave. We're going to include some classics in there, and this is definitely now one of them. I remember being in the cinema, midnight viewing with my best friend. I'm already at the state of emotional distraught after going through the previous sort of 5 to 10 minutes of seeing everyone in Rogue One die. I mean, the build up through that was amazing in itself, because what I love about that is, not to just digress into a bit of Rogue One talk, but the fact that this film was about obviously having hope and the rebellion sort of pushing themselves forward and not giving up. And then it was a little bit about the Force as well, in terms of you have to have trust in the Force. Jin's there with their sort of kyber crystal necklace. And it was just the fact that the Force sort of got each individual in that story to where they needed to be to help the rebellion move forward. And through that. And then at the end, it's just sort of like, here's the dark side of the Force for you. Like, the Force is doing its natural thing of trying to get something going through and getting the rebellion sort of story going. And then Vader just turns up at the end to just decimate them. I remember sitting in the cinema, and obviously, they're in the hallway scene and everything goes dark. And I just remember hearing that breathing. And I just grabbed my best friend's arm and I'm just like, is this what I think it is? And then that lightsaber lit up, and I jumped. We've chatted about it before in terms of what the British are like in the cinema. We're fairly reserved. We don't go wild. This isn't America. You're sitting in an American viewing of Endgame, for example, with all the cheering and whooping going on. This is a reserved thing. But I jumped out my seat and punched the air when Vader's lightsaber lit up, and that hallway just goes red, and he starts tearing through them, and I was hands in my head, aghast at watching this scene. I could not believe what I just saw, watching him tear through that hallway like that. Deflecting the blaster bolt with his hand and the Force was unreal. Pinning the guy to the ceiling, slashing him down, giving that guy at the door when he's trying to get through the door, giving him a new belly button piercing. It was just fantastic. And I remember going 2 nights later with my partner at the time to go and watch it. And just before the hallway scene happened, she said afterwards, she's like, just before the hallway scene happened, you grabbed my hand and squeezed it really hard. She's like, I knew then something was about to happen. So it was I can't even pretend I wasn't excited to see it again. I was just like, this is when I can get awesome.
No.
Yeah, and it's just unbelievable. That scene is, it's definitely my top 5. I make no bones about that being in there. And what's ironic is that when I was looking at the list, it was one of the ones I almost forgot about. And I don't know how, because when I'm sitting here looking at my 2 screens on my PC, the background is Vader in that hallway scene. So I don't know how I could sit there and make a list and almost have forgotten about it. So I was kind of annoyed at myself for that. So, But yeah, Vader hallway scene definitely makes our Star Wars top 5 scenes. So I'm gonna put the next one out there first of all. Again, it's an absolute iconic scene, and I'm going to play a little audio clip just to obviously signify what this particular scene is. So,
Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father.
He told me enough. He told me you killed him.
No, I am your father.
Say what?
So, yep, the Vader "I am your father" scene in Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back, that has to be up there for me because it still remains one of the biggest twists in cinema history. Obviously, depending on what order and if you've had it spoiled, which it obviously would be for most people nowadays, ahead of time, that Vader is Anakin's father. But, even when this was released and it still remains, I see lots of TikTok videos of people showing their friends or their kids Star Wars for the first time and it getting to that scene and just them filming their reaction and just seeing the shock in people's faces still at this day and age, exactly what happens with that scene. So one of the biggest twists in film history, something that you never expected coming. And for me, it has to go up there as one of the biggest things because you've just seen basically, the dad cut his own son's hand off. So, and then tell him that he's his dad. So it's like, cool parenting. Well done.
Cool.
So, does this appear in your top 5, Dave, or did it not quite make it in?
It didn't quite make it. And it's on my honorable mention just because it's such an iconic. I mean, obviously, I think it probably put Star Wars fully on the map during that era, which I can't speak to totally because I wasn't around for it. And I wish I could have been able to see something like this be dropped in theaters. I'm sure that would have been absolutely insane. But it's just, you can't not have it towards this list, at least somewhere in the vicinity. I mean, It's just, it defines the original trilogy of Star. It doesn't define it, I guess. I feel like a couple other scenes might. Maybe it's on my top list, maybe not, but it's an incredible scene.
Fair. What's the next one on your list then?
I'll stick with the original trilogy. So, mine is the scene with Luke and Vader and Palpatine in the throne room, and Luke tosses down his lightsaber and he says, "You have failed. Yeah. I am a Jedi like my father before me." And that scene is just, it gives me chills watching it. It was featured in our best Star Wars quotes episode we dropped a bit ago because of how impactful of a line it was. And it just kind of embodies the whole original trilogy in that line. It's about, we obviously have this father-son thing with Luke and Darth Vader. We have this dark and light struggling with the dark and the light. And you get this young hero who tosses down his lightsaber, who might just be ready to die at that moment, and it's just about him finally conquering that darkness that he feels. We see him feel it during the duel with Vader, even points in Empire, really, and then again in Return of the Jedi when he really starts going crazy after he mentions Leia, which, can you blame him? Probably not. But it's just, man, it's just such a powerful scene, and it just really feels like it brings the emotion of Star Wars and what it really started out as in that original trilogy to a peak in that scene.
Absolutely. I mean, I actually watched Return of the Jedi a couple of days ago, and I did toy. This does get an honourable mention for me. I did toy about it being in the top 5, but it is still, like you said, it's an absolutely iconic scene. And after him going absolutely nuts after Vader mentions Leia and just beating him down, chopping off his hand in sort of revenge, and then realizing that. I just love that moment when Palpatine's like, you are now mine, and he's just sort of like, take your place, take my place by my side. And then he's just sort of like looking down at his own robotic hand in the black glove and realizing that for every bit of Vader he chops off, he becomes Vader himself. And then throwing that lightsaber away, and as you said, saying, I'm a Jedi like my father before me, you failed. And then sort of the white flap just sort of falls down on his tunic, revealing that whilst he's wearing all black, that he was still has the light in him and always will do for the most part until we get to episode 8 anyway. But yeah, it's definitely
until he wants to kill his nephew, but
wouldn't kill his father, but his nephew's fine. It's okay.
Bad dream.
But yeah, definitely, I think is worthy of definitely in talk of being around up there for sure. So just sets him apart from a lot of the people that went before him in terms of those that fall to the dark side, and he's just able to resist it, even though he's been tempted several times throughout the trilogy to go there, and almost obviously gave in at that moment as well. So yeah, definitely a good one, Dave. What have you got next on your list then? Let's get to I guess this is number 3, isn't it?
Let's jump from the old to the new. Coming out of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, believe it or not.
Oh, okay.
But
Interesting.
that final matchup between Vader and Obi-Wan, and not the fight itself, but the aftermath. The I'm sorry, Anakin from Ewan McGregor as he's looking at him, and Vader's mask is torn apart and he's heaving, and Obi-Wan is just teary-eyed looking at what used to be his brother, and he says, "I'm sorry, Anakin, I'm sorry for all of it." And it's just, God, it gets me every time, man. I teared up when I first watched it. It gets me emotional every time I watch that scene, and it just sends flashbacks back to all their moments coming through the prequels and this just iconic relationship of brotherhood. When you think of brotherhood, you think of Obi-Wan and Anakin, and it's just heartbreaking, their story, and touching back onto it, and him seeing him like that, and Anakin's retort, and he's the one who it wasn't Obi-Wan who killed him, who failed him. He's not his failure. He killed Anakin. The lighting in the scene, I mean, it was just one of the best scenes that Disney has put together. The way, and Ewan spoke on it actually and said that lighting happened naturally. That wasn't a post-edit effect, because they actually use the lightsabers now that light up on set. And he said the way that it went from blue to red while Hayden said that line was just natural, which I have a hard time believing, because it was perfect.
Must have enhanced it a little bit.
Yeah, but it was just an incredible scene, and it really helped end that series that had a lot of issues throughout.
Yeah, I mean, I did love the Kenobi series. Yeah, we could have spent a little bit less time sort of going through certain bits of him and Leia. I mean, the iconic Leia chase scene by the bounty hunters in the forests was obviously peak Star Wars
cinema.
But yeah, that scene at the end. I mean, I after the fight itself, I was a touch disappointed in, because we were promised like an epic rematch from Episode 3, and it wasn't quite at that level. I mean, okay, it wasn't anywhere near that level.
No, nowhere near.
And so going on to that, but having that at the end of it, was definitely iconic chat between them. Especially when, what's so interesting now is that the amount of parallels they put in between that and the previous scenes that have been, that aren't even necessarily in timeline order, but like some of the chat between them sort of mirrors the chat between Vader and Ahsoka at the end of Rebels, in the end of season 2 of Rebels, when they sort of face off, and then obviously some of it going back to obviously their fight in Episode 3 as well. But I love that retrospectively they can add in stuff that mirrors stuff that isn't necessarily in timeline order, but still has a heavy impact, because you would have seen that stuff already, and so therefore when they mention it, you kind of like have that, the mind jumps to those scenes as well and goes, this is all just emotionally thrown in, especially for a character like Anakin / Vader, who is obviously becoming less Anakin and more Vader as time goes, as Anakin gets buried. And you think all these emotional moments that he has to go through at each point. And some of it, a lot of people don't even know about, because a lot of those emotional moments come in the comics now as well.
Yes.
There's certain points when he's like trying to hunt down some of Padme's old handmaidens and stuff like that, and he gets to go to like Padme's grave and stuff like this, and just all these emotional moments that you don't necessarily get to see, but just all these things that contribute to his character along the way that now retrospectively go towards his turning back at the end of Episode 6. There's still that little chink of Anakin in there, but yeah, that whole speech was, I've got to agree, the lighting can't have been 100% natural. Like, it has to have been enhanced at some point. Just to, even if you enhanced it, even if the glow was there a little bit, then they just go, let's enhance that. Especially the bit between, like, Kenobi's talking and the blue lights up his face, and then Anakin's like, he's like, you didn't kill Anakin Skywalker, I did, and his face just lights up in red.
It turns, yeah.
That can't have just been 100% natural.
Right.
But, like, and even at the end, when we finally, like, Kenobi almost accepts that Anakin's gone in a way, And he's like, my friend is truly dead. And he's like, goodbye, Darth, and just walks away from him. And he just left with a battered, fucked up Vader just screaming at Obi-Wan after him.
I did have an issue with that last part there, though, because they made a point of Obi-Wan speaking to Qui-Gon right before it, saying, no matter what happens here, this ends today. He basically saying he dies or I die.
Yeah.
And you made a point of him saying that, and then you left him alive for the second time, just like you left him alive on Mustafar. I feel like you should probably kill him. But other than that, no.
Yeah, I think because he had got to have that chat with him, that's what changed his mind. Like, even if he says that my friend is truly dead, it's the fact that he got to see Anakin's face and they had that chat.
Yeah,
and
that's fair.
maybe like Anakin taking responsibility a bit and saying, you didn't kill Anakin, I did. Kind of like just makes him think, well, then my friend is actually already dead. I don't need to like give you a mortal blow. Yeah, he's like, we'll just leave it as it is. But that's twice now that Kenobi has doomed the galaxy to a lot of hatred and a lot of death. So maybe Kenobi's not as clean cut as he should be.
He's got some errors, okay.
Yeah, but great scene, to be fair. Okay, so next on my list is I'm heading to the prequels, and something again that I almost didn't think of and had to be reminded of it, because I don't know how I can include a top Star Wars scenes and not have this in it. But Dave, have you ever heard the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? Because it's not a story the Jedi would tell you, to be fair. But yeah, this scene makes it in there for me. It's become obviously iconic, whether it's just quoted verbatim or whether it's become meme material, doesn't really matter. It's up there for me as one of the most iconic ones, because obviously, Plagueis, Palpatine has spent years obviously cultivating his relationship and sowing the seeds with Anakin. And then this is just one of those ones that just truly starts to turn in, because he's obviously worried about Padme dying and childbirth, and Palpatine lays the seeds of doubt in him that there is this way of actually getting around that and saving her from death. And what I really love about this scene, to be fair, to top it all off, is Ian McDiarmid is obviously mostly a stage actor, and he uses his sort of stage acting in this, his sort of classic acting, to the absolute full when he's telling this story. The way he tells this is what obviously makes it so iconic for me, and the way that he embellishes the story and accentuates certain words, just pulls this off to me to make it one of the greatest short stories told of all time.
Yeah, it's insanely iconic, and it just makes me laugh because just the way that's been used, whether it's social media or my buddy who would copy and pasted that thing so often in so many situations over the years. But it really is. And Ian just leans into that. I mean, he absolutely eats that scene up with the way he tells that story to Anakin. And Hayden kills it too. He does a really good job at conveying the guiltily interested, he's like, he does a good job. I thought Hayden really did a much better job in Revenge of the Sith compared to Attack of the Clones. He really took a lot of strides there, and he took strides coming into Ahsoka, obviously too. But yeah, it's just it is a great scene. It wasn't on my my honorable mention, but it might deserve to be there.
So, okay, let's move on to what I've got next on my list. I have a comic book scene, just to throw something a little bit different in there. So, I think it was sort of like the 2017-2018. There was a comic book run of there was a Darth Vader series, and then there was a Star Wars series that run sort of side by side. You're nodding, and I think you probably know where this may be going then, but
have a feeling.
Those that don't know, there was there were these two series that were set basically between episode 4 and episode 5. The Star Wars run was basically following Han, Luke, Leia, and Chewie on their adventures between the episodes, and then obviously what Vader was doing between those episodes as well. They run concurrently and they cross over every now and again, but then there was a big crossover event right in the middle of it. I think it was a 3-issue series called Vader Down. And what basically happens is that they're trying to. There's like a little rebel base on this planet, and they're all sort of there with loads of ships in space as well, like fighters. and Vader shows up, and he's like obliterating the crap out of all of these fighters single-handedly, as Vader would do, best pilot in the galaxy. And Luke jumps in an X-wing and is trying to, or an A-wing, I can't remember what it was. I think it might have been an A-wing. And he's like, the only way I'm going to be able to take this guy down is to crash into him, like literally. So he like basically rams into him in space. The two of them crash down to the planet. Leia's like in charge of this little secret base, and she basically orders everyone to go out. She's like, Vader's crashed, let's go and get him. This is a really good opportunity. So hundreds, if not thousands, of these rebels show up and surround Vader. And I remember it was so iconic reading this. And they all surround Vader, and they just look out at Vader as he sort of stands up, and they're like, Vader, you are surrounded, surrender. And Vader just turns around and goes, whips out his lightsaber, ignites it, and goes, all I am surrounded by is fear and dead men. And then kills all of them, slaughters all of them, like hundreds, if not thousands of rebels. He takes them out by himself. Like, they've got tanks, they've got soldiers on foot, they've got everything. They're almost, apart from like maybe the big guns. And Vader takes out all of them single-handedly. And it was just that line though, that just all I'm surrounded by is fear and dead men. To me, I love that moment so much. Like, I can't think of not having that in the top scenes, and most people won't know about it. If you haven't, I recommend going out and reading that. Both series runs concurrently and together, but getting to that Vader Down sort of special, definitely iconic. It looks like you have obviously read it, Dave. Going where your reaction, I wasn't sure if you would have done or not.
Yeah. So I'm ashamed to say it was my number one OLI. It was just on the outside, but my God, that's got to be one of the hardest lines in all of fiction. I mean, I'm not saying it's the best, but my God, it's got to be on that list. I mean, it's just, and the art behind it too, when it's happening. I mean, it's all just a beautiful sequence. He's using the Force to pull grenade pins out and a bunch of stuff from everybody surrounding him. I mean, he is just igniting the thermal detonators. I mean, he just absolutely, it's just such a cool way to see, because every Star Wars nerd out there, they want to see Vader unleash. We see him leashed by the Emperor constantly. We see him, and we were just talking about this because we were just talking about the Gillen series, I think 2015 Darth Vader comic run, and we're talking about how often we have to read Vader restraining his urge to just slaughter everybody because the Emperor doesn't want him to, and he has to obey by that, and so he has to end up outsmarting people instead of just slaughtering them. And we finally just get to see Vader unleash and be who he has been bred to be, and just wipe out so many rebels. And it's just incredible. I would love to see that brought to the screen if possible at some point, but it might be.
Don't think we ever will, unfortunately. Now it's in comic book, but I mean, there are so many great moments in the comics that if you're not reading them, you really need to, because it just enhances, obviously. Sometimes the comics are just done for the sake of it, to like fill in a bit of story and stuff like that, but a lot of the Vader stuff is just so great. I mean, in the same sort of comic book concurrent run, there's a moment when like Luke and Vader face off against each other, and Vader's like looking at the lightsaber that Luke's got, and he's like, I recognize that lightsaber. And Luke's like, he's like, I'm going to kill you because you killed my father. And Vader just looks back at him and he's like, you're going to have to be more specific. I've killed a lot of people's fathers. Or in the 2015 comic run you were talking about. Oh no, maybe it's the later one. But yeah, obviously right after episode 3, when Vader's sort of still hunting down some of the Jedi, and he goes after Jocasta Nu, and they capture her, and they're transporting her back in one of the gunships. So there's like Vader, Jocasta Nu, and a bunch of clones. And she's like trying to tell the clones what to do, and the clones were just like, we don't take orders from Jedi scum. And Jocasta Nu just looks at the clones. She's like, you're all idiots. You don't even know who you take your orders from, do you? And she like points to Vader, and he's like, that's Anakin Skywalker, former Jedi Knight. And there's this great moment in there when like the clones look at Vader looks back at the clones, and all of a sudden the next scene you see is just the clones being force thrown out of the gunship midair. Vader's like, no one will know my fucking secret.
Dude, there's some comedy gold in those comic runs. With the one we were reading too, there's similar things where this Dr. Aphra's like, how did you find me? And then all of a sudden you just get 4 panels of Vader torturing and killing and slaughtering a group of people, and then it cuts back to a close-up on his face, and then it shows her. She's like, I probably don't want to know that, do I? And there's a lot of funny scenes of Vader just slaughtering people with the calm face of the mask.
Oh, and in that run as well, like BT-1 and 000, the two murder droids, they have some classic comedy moments as well. But yes, so yes, that all I'm surrounded by is fear and dead men is definitely makes, for me personally, a sort of a top 5 Star Wars scene. But what have you got next on your list, Dave?
So I got something coming out of the animated series, the Clone Wars Season 7, and that is Ahsoka versus Darth Maul in the throne room. Now, this probably wouldn't be on a lot of people's lists. I don't know. But this fight scene between Maul and Ahsoka, not only the fight scene and the choreography, but the discussion of Maul telling Ahsoka about Anakin's training and about the Emperor who's been grooming Anakin to be his apprentice. And we get this insight. And Maul is basically telling Ahsoka, like, wake up, it's happening. The Emperor's plan is coming to fruition. And just seeing Order 66 roll out amidst a fight between Maul and Ahsoka, and a scene in which they actually hired Ray Park and another, I forgot who the fight choreographer was for Ahsoka, but they put the suits on them, and that scene we actually see are those people choreographed this fight. I mean, it looks like it too. When you watch the scene in the Clone Wars, you can tell that real people were behind these movements. I mean, it's beautiful though. It stuns me, honestly. It's one of my favorite lightsaber scenes in all of Star Wars because I think they did an absolutely perfect job doing this scene. And again, it just gets elevated by Darth Maul speaking about the prophecy and speaking about Anakin's grooming. And it's two of my favorite characters all time in Star Wars too. Darth Maul is my favorite Sith probably in all of Star Wars, and Ahsoka is my girl. I on our show have voted that she would beat Luke Skywalker, and that's become controversial, but I'm sticking with my girl Ahsoka. So this scene right here is just everything I could ask for.
It's funny that you do mention this because the final spot I had in my top 5 scenes is the conversation between Maul and Ahsoka in this scene. I didn't put the fight in there because it's a great fight. It definitely is because of the way that it's come about and the mocap with it as well. But every time I hear the conversation between these two, it literally gives me goosebumps. And what we're going to do, Dave, is we're actually going to listen to that scene. I pulled up an audio clip for it. It's about 3.5 minutes long because I didn't cut out any bits of it, especially when there's a little it diverts to a little battle on the bridge between the Mandalorians and the clones. But it's because you get that moment where they have the initial conversation, and when Maul's everything that you've ever done has led up to this moment, and he's just stood there with his hand reaching out, and and the glass explodes behind them, and they don't even flinch. Nope. She just sits there contemplating this offer. But yeah, let's give it a listen, shall we?
Care to tell me what this is all about? Or would you rather save it for the council?
Oh, no. You are the one that I wish to speak with. Were you not cast out of your order?
I left voluntarily.
Yes, but you were motivated to leave by the hypocrisy of the Jedi Council. We were both tools for greater powers.
I am here to bring you to justice.
Justice is merely the construct of the current power base. A base which, according to my calculations, is about to change.
And Darth Sidious is behind it?
He is behind everything. In the shadows, always, but soon, very soon, he will reveal himself.
With your help, the Jedi can stop Sidious before it's too late.
Too late? For what? The Republic to fall? It already has, and you just can't see it. There is no justice, no law, no order, except for the one that will replace it. The time of the Jedi has passed. They cannot defeat Sidious. But together, you and I can.
Every choice you have made has led you to this moment.
help you. But you must answer one question.
You have but to ask.
What do you want with Anakin Skywalker?
He is the key to everything.
To bring balance to the Force?
To destroy. He has long been groomed for his role as my master's new apprentice.
You lie.
I'm afraid not. In fact, I was so certain of his fate that I orchestrated this war to lure him here with Kenobi, to kill him, thus depriving Sidious of his prized pupil.
I know Anakin. Your vision is flawed.
I see the Padawan needs one last lesson.
God. I had to throw that video on at the same time and mute it just so I could watch along. And I mean, are you kidding me? I had chills that whole time. And the voice acting in this scene, by the way, shout out to both of them because it's so good.
I mean, we know how good of a job Sam Witwer has done with Maul through the Clone Wars and Rebels. But my God, I debated including the maybe it was an honorable mention, the Kenobi line, just because of how iconic that's become. But his voice acting in this, as Maul, has always been fantastic. But there's just something extra about this scene that I immediately thought of this as being a top 5 for me. The minute it went in there, like I said, I'm not even necessarily that bothered about the fight after this because of how impactful and how emotional this scene is. Is like, especially if you're watching the actual scene as opposed to just listening to it. But a lot of that clip is, I hear it on TikTok all the time. I don't know why it seems to pop on my TikTok like every single day. But it's just, it is just a fantastically written, fantastically acted out scene. Like I said, I just love that moment when Maul's just stood there with his hand out and just the glass breaks and they just don't even flinch whilst they're contemplating everything. And Ahsoka's failure to or her trust in Anakin being so strong that she doesn't even consider that Maul could be correct.
Yeah.
And the fact that the two of them combined, probably, if they went and got Kenobi as well, after that, they probably could have dealt with Sidious and stopped Anakin from turning. And it's just like, that is a pivotal moment that Ahsoka leaves the Jedi Order because partly of the arrogance of the Council, but her arrogance and failure to think, even though she kind of knew in the background of her head about sort of the seeds of the dark side from Anakin, her arrogance to believe that Anakin could not do that leads to the downfall as well.
It's brutal because, like you said, I mean, the glass breaks and then all of a sudden she says, "I will help you." And the first time I was watching, I was like, whoa, wait, what? Like, what do you mean you will help him? Okay, what do we got going here? And then as soon as Anakin is mentioned like that, she ignites her lightsabers in about 2 seconds. It's just like, oh, she went from, I'll help you to, I'm going to kill you as soon as just because you said Anakin is on that part of it. And the other thing that pisses me off is, I know it wasn't going to happen because it's not part of the story, but it feels like I was robbed of having Ahsoka and Maul fight along side by side. I feel like I got robbed of that because those are, again, 2 of my favorite characters in Star Wars. And it hurts my soul a little bit thinking how close we were to, like, maybe they tell a story where they're fighting side by side. Yeah, but alas.
But to be fair, those finale sort of 3 or 4 episodes of the Clone Wars are littered with what I believe have scenes that will stand the test of time. I mean, like, you do go into the battle after that between those two. Follow that by going into Order 66, as we see it from what's happening to Ahsoka's point of view. Her releasing Maul getting his own hallway scene where he's just doesn't even need a lightsaber. He's just brutalizing clones. He's like, I will use the hallway itself to kill you all. following that and going into the last couple of episodes. But I remember at the time, like, whilst watching it and being absolutely captivated, I wasn't necessarily thrilled that it focused so heavily on Ahsoka. Because this is the end of the Clone Wars show. It's the end of Clone Wars as a whole. And whilst you kind of see the end of it with, obviously, Episode 3, I was like, there's a lot more to this story than just Ahsoka. Sure. And whilst I don't want to annoy you, Dave, because I know she's a girl.
No.
But I was just like, it was almost a bit too Ahsoka heavy for me in the conclusion to the Clone Wars. But obviously, it's something I mention a lot because it seems that maybe not a lot of people know it, but I love to bring it up, is that obviously the moon they crash on at the end, the Venator, that where Rex and Ahsoka live and all the other clones die, is the very same moon that that Jango Fett was recruited by Dooku on, which effectively started the Clone Wars. So the Clone Wars was sort of started on this moon by Jango Fett being recruited to be the clone template, and as far as the Clone Wars series goes, it ends on that moon with the death of Ahsoka and the clones.
That's wild. That's wild. I never knew that. It's poetry. It's like poetry. It rhymes.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, the more Ahsoka, Siege of Mandalore scene. That's what rounds off my top 5, and I'm glad you had it in there, to be fair, because I was so excited to say that to talk about this particular scene. So that just leaves us with your final choice then, Dave, for a top 5 Star Wars scenes. What have you got?
And my final choice is going to be probably the least, hallway scene is up there. But again, like you said at the start of this, least original, it doesn't matter because some of these scenes are just iconic. And I can't leave this episode without talking about the Battle of Mustafar. The climactic end to the Revenge of the Sith with Anakin, even though the dialogue between Anakin and Obi-Wan, if you were to actually critique it, it probably could have been much better. But, right before they kick off that fight with my allegiance is the Republic, democracy, we can recite the whole thing. I could go off, but it just doesn't matter for some reason. It's such an iconic sequence of dialogue between those two before they get into one of the greatest shot action scenes that I take into consideration. Best, I don't think we'll ever get a better Star Wars action scene than that. To the point where they had to slow down some of the choreography between Hayden and Ewan because they were moving so fast with the actual things. They literally had to slow down some of the scenes. It's just the testament of the amount of work those two put in, the climax of the relationship they built over the 2 movies that they worked together. I mean, it's an incredible, incredible ending to an incredible movie, and I can't leave here without talking about it.
It was originally in my top 5, and I did bump it down to an honourable mention because it was definitely up there for me. But then I was like, when I had to add in the Plagueis scene and the Rogue One hallway scene, that's why it got bumped in the end from the top 5. But yeah, absolutely, it's definitely up there for me. I mean, if you take out obviously the Sidious and Yoda battles in between where it cuts off to, the Anakin and Obi-Wan battle is officially the longest sword fight in film history.
I was going to say it feels like cheating because I picked like a half-hour sequence because of how long it is, but I didn't know that. That's wild.
I think from like scene end to end, it's something like 13 minutes or something of actual screen time. So yeah, it is considered to be the longest ongoing sword fight in film history.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, definitely iconic. Like you said, the combination of everything that those two have been through and obviously sets everything up moving forward. Having the old limbless Anakin, you're just at the mercy of Kenobi, really, and obviously, again, as we talked about earlier with the other Anakin and Kenobi scene, Kenobi failing at the end of it, really, because he may have stopped Anakin, but he didn't kill him off, and just caused another sort of couple of decades worth of hurt for the galaxy. So Kenobi losing out on this one. But yeah, definitely has to be up there as one of the most iconic sort of bits of all of Star Wars. I remember being so excited for it because obviously Order 66 happens only about halfway through of Episode 3, and you're like, damn, like maybe if this film's coming to conclusion, you still get a lot more after that, and the emotion of this going into it. So yeah, definitely a top 5 scene for sure. I know we have a few honourable mentions as well, so let's jump into those. I mean, I just mentioned it there, so I'm going to throw this in there. Order 66 was an honourable mention for me because it is again, a huge moment in the Star Wars franchise of basically not just the Jedi, but essentially the Republic getting killed off, because it's during this when the Republic dies and the Empire rises. And things change forever. And as much as I am a Sith, I've always said, if given the choice between Jedi and Sith, I always would be a Sith. I'd be very easily corrupted to the dark side. No matter how many times I've watched Episode 3, I still get emotional at Order 66 and the Death of Jedi, because some of it is, and I think what someone did say to me is that if you've watched the Clone Wars TV series, it makes Order 66 that much more emotional, because if you're just watching it in terms of the films, most of the Jedi that we see get killed are just characters that you've seen in the background here and there. They don't have any impact on the films. But then to go through the Clone Wars series and watch, Plo Koon get blown up, to get Aayla Secura get savaged on Felucia by those clones, and her lover as well, being the one that led the charge against her. Order 66 gets an honourable mention for me. What have you got on your honourable mentions, Dave?
Yeah, so we touched on a few of them, so I'll skip over those, some of the ones that were on your list. But I got to throw the Luke Skywalker hallway scene, Mando season 2 end scene.
It's on mine as well, yeah.
Because had again another hallway scene that I had no idea was coming, and when you get a surprise hallway scene like that, it's just an absolute pleasure. So seeing that green lightsaber ignite, or seeing that the X-wing come through, really was kind of the first hint, and then you see the black cloak, and you're like, no,
it can't be Luke.
No,
they wouldn't put Luke at the end of this series.
That. No, we would know, or there's no way this is Luke. So, there's a green lightsaber, and oh my goodness, he just absolutely tore through those. It was sick. Even down to the little force crunch he has at the end, the nice little touch. The way he was just kind of gliding through. I mean, it was just an awesome way to end that season. So that's got to go on there.
Yeah, I had that on my mentions list as well, because it was truly epic to see that and experience it. Because I remember thinking, after watching it, because I was leaping up in the air as I was watching that and going like, oh my fucking god, it's like, I can't believe you put Luke in this. And I was just like, I wish I'd almost filmed it as like a reaction video in a way, but I wouldn't have had the same reaction second time round to be able to film it. And obviously, if you don't know it's coming, unless you're a YouTuber or something like that doing it as like a reaction thing, then there's no way you could have known. But yeah, definitely gets in there for me. I had one more honourable mention on my list, which was the death of Kanan Jarrus in Rebels.
Oh, great call.
Rebels is one of those ones. It was like Clone Wars in a way that the series as a whole, it's a slow start, but really kicks off after its sort of first season. But everything leading up to, this is getting towards the end of Rebels, and you're interested to see what happens to all of them at the end of it, because where are they in the original trilogy and all those kind of questions. And then the emotion of the rescues Hera. He seems to sort of know that something's going down, because he's had this sort of build up with the Force and stuff, and the Lothar wolves that Ezra had connection with as well, and you see him sort of cut his hair and get ready for this final battle to go and save Hera, and gets her, and then they're obviously trying to escape, and then that moment where he's on top of the fuel tanker as the Empire fires on it, and he's just holding back the flames. And as he does that, he's holding back the flames with one hand, and he pushes Hera back to Ezra the other one, and he's telling them to go. And then that moment of clarity when you just focus on his eyes, and the Force just heals his eyes, so he's able to see Hera and Ezra for one last time before he Force pushes them away and then is incinerated.
Beautiful.
The whole emotion of that really gets me almost every single time that I watch it. I'm not afraid to say, I hate people that tell me you can't get emotional about films and TV series and stuff, and Star Wars makes me emotional in a lot of ways, and that scene is still one that gets me every time. It was really close to being a top 5 pick for me, but I think there are other scenes that just in the history of Star Wars beat it out, but I had to get it in there as honorable mention.
Yeah, that was a good call, and I'm with you. It makes me emotional, and I see way too many damn edits of those sick bastards out there who keep putting edits together of that scene, except adding clips of the flashbacks between Kanan and Hera and different audio, and they're just really trying to sink me into the ground with this emotion, because that scene gets me every time, and people just love making edits of that. But what a great scene to cap it off. It was absolutely, and it was such a sad ending. Kanan was awesome. So that was definitely a tough way to go. I did want to throw one more out there,
Go for it.
which I haven't shown any love to the sequels. I don't think I have a single scene. No, I was going to throw one from Yoda, but it's more of a dialogue scene anyway. His scene with the greatest teacher failure is that's one of my favorite all time quotes. But the main scene I wanted to actually shout out was Poe Dameron in Force Awakens, and it's towards the end where I guess it's the Resistance base, whatever it is, Maz Kanata's little cantina area, and the Empire shows up, or the First Order shows up, and they're wiping out people left and right. People are scrambling, and then all of a sudden Poe Dameron shows up, and we get this kind of almost like a one shot of him doing these crazy acrobatics and taking out 6 or 7 TIE fighters in a row and swooping low as Finn yells, "That's one hell of a pilot." And it was just, that scene just gets me every time, because the score that happens when the Resistance is coming low across the water in the X-Wings, the score that I think it's called the March of the Resistance, the soundtrack by, again, John Williams, is incredible. And then you get that scene by Poe, and it's one of my favorite moments of the sequel.
Yeah, it is a great moment. That whole scene does remind me of Battlefront 2015. I don't know if you ever played that, Dave. But I was a god at the flying in that game. I very rarely was never top of the board on those sorts of games. It just reminded me of myself playing that game, to be fair. I'm very humble, obviously, about these types of things, but it was a great scene. It was a really good scene, to be fair, really well shot at that moment in time. So I do love the brief one you mentioned there about the Yoda scene with Luke in Episode 8.
Yes.
Probably one of the best moments of the sequels. I know that when you guys did your Star Wars quotes episode, it was up there as well, because it is a great moment where sort of like this character that is not the Luke anyone expected, not the Luke that anyone technically kind of wanted either, but Yoda shows up out the blue and just has this chat with him, and not only seeing that, but just the power of the Force beyond life itself, when Yoda's able to summon lightning to set this little building on fire, and then sits there and has a go at Luke Skywalker for being a bellend, and he's just like, what have you been doing with yourself? He's like, you've learned nothing, or you haven't done anything that I taught you. And gives him this little speech. He's just like, as he said there, what was it? The greatest. I can't remember the quote now. You tell me the quote, Dave.
We are what they grow beyond. That is the burden of all masters. But I think it starts with the greatest teacher failure is, and then I think it leads. I always get the order wrong.
But yeah, that was a tingly little moment for me in watching Episode 8. I don't hate Episode 8 as much as many people do. I'm okay with it for the most part. I think whilst it isn't the Luke Skywalker any of us wanted, because we do want to see, in a way, sort of Grandmaster Luke, a badass, like, the most powerful Jedi of all time sort of Luke. At the same point, I'm not as connected to the Legends Luke Skywalker as many people were that hated this version of Luke. So I was okay accepting this in a way. So and The Last Jedi. So I don't have it as the worst film. We've already talked about that. Shitty Solo takes that one. But yeah, still that Yoda quote was fantastic. So anything else to mention about best scenes in Star Wars? Anything else you want to throw in there as a last hurrah?
I don't have anything else on my list. I'm rattling my brain, but I know we didn't throw in the Duel of the Fates, but obviously that's a classic. But I guess it should be on the honorable mention. But, yeah, that's about it.
It's not sure if the scene itself is classic or if it's just more the music that's the classic for that one.
I don't want to piss people off, but I think it's just the music. Some of the choreography wasn't great in that scene. If you go back and rewatch, I'm just going to say it. But Darth Maul's still my favorite. Everything he did was great. He did nothing wrong.
Although the good bit of choreography is just after Qui-Gon's stabbed, essentially, and after Kenobi's there with sort of his anger raging through him and waiting for the laser shield to be dropped. And as soon as it drops, the first sort of 15 seconds of their fight there, the speed that they go at is unreal. I remember I always watch it back and go, they were incredibly fast doing that together, and I know they had like a good few months of practice.
Oh, Ewan was going crazy.
It always gets me. Although I always loved the fact that they had to keep reshooting those scenes because Ewan McGregor kept making the lightsaber noises when they were fighting. Something he's talked about before. And something about Liam Neeson's talked about before as well. Like, apparently it was pissing Liam Neeson off. He's like, I want to get the scene done and move on. And he's like, we have to keep retaking it because you're there going underneath it all. So
that's why he's our Obi-Wan.
Yeah, classic. Yeah, but I do love that movie, to be fair. No, I don't think I've got anything else that I can chuck in on top of what we've already discussed. I think we've covered it pretty damn well, to be fair, mate. So, Star Wars, one of the biggest loves of my life. I'm never going to fall out of love with it, no matter what stuff they throw up there. I don't care if everything that they produce from now until the end of time is trash. It's never going to diminish what I love of Star Wars from now on. So, Dave, thank you very much indeed. It's so appreciated for you joining us. It's late night for you. It's early morning for me. You're going to bed. I've got to get to work. But May the 4th had to do something to top this off. I am releasing this on Friday, May the 3rd, just so it's not the weekend, and we'll get a chance to listen to it before the weekend. But, May the 4th, Tales of the Empire is dropping. Going to be binge watching that.
Yes.
Saturday evening itself, I'm going to the cinema to watch the 25th anniversary of The Phantom Menace, so I get to go and see that on the big screen again. I can't wait to go and watch this film again on the big screen and reminisce of when I was a young whippersnapper 25 years ago, getting to go out and watch that. So, are you excited for Tales of the Empire, to be fair? Let's just touch that quickly.
Yes, and by the way, I believe Caleb is going to May 3rd, Phantom Menace. I believe I'll be tagging along with him, so we will be enjoying that in theaters as well. I'm very excited for Tales of the Empire. I had no idea it was coming out, and I was telling the guys, if somebody were to tell me, hey, they're going to do a Tales of the Empire series, I'd be like, nice. Who are the subjects? And they were like, it's going to be Barriss Offee and Morgan Elsbeth. I'd probably initially be like, why? What the hell? What do you mean? Why? Why would we do that? But the trailer looked awesome, and I am officially very intrigued to see what happened with Barriss Offee and the Inquisitors and Morgan Elsbeth's background with Grievous and the Night Sisters. I mean, I'm hooked. I had no idea it was coming in, so I'm very excited for it.
Absolutely. Yeah, originally when they announced Phantom Menace was going to the cinema, I did book a May the 3rd Friday evening viewing. And then I was like, it makes more sense to go on May the 4th. It's Star Wars Day itself. So said to the wife, we're going on let's go on the Saturday instead to view that. So, yeah, excited for Tales of the Empire. I wouldn't have necessarily picked Morgan Elsbeth as the story to go with for her. But it's going to be interesting, especially since her story in this seems to be set during the Clone Wars, and maybe just a touch after that as well. Yeah. So Empire, maybe not quite, but hey, we're getting some animated Grievous back, which is going to be fucking amazing. Yes. Yeah, can't wait to see Barriss Offee's little story here. I'd love for her story to end at the end of these episodes with her finding out that Vader is Anakin. And her going, really? Are you fucking kidding me after that fight we had in the temple? It's just like, and now you're the one that fucking leads the Inquisitors and is like the right-hand side of the Empire.
That's going to be great.
And then Vader just to be like, I've still got no time for you, and just cuts her down, and that ends her story. That's my ideal ending to it.
Yeah.
Hopefully so. I mean, he hated the Inquisitors, so imagine seeing Barriss Offee in there that just reminds him of Ahsoka. And he's just like, I can't be dealing with this, but... yes, Dave, thank you so much for coming on. You were, I know I've mentioned it a few times, I don't want to keep harping on about it, but you were sorely missed for unforeseen reasons for our anniversary episode. Whilst JD and Caleb did a good job on your stead, I know you've probably been on this program more than almost anyone else, apart from maybe Lee from Lights Camera Run. So it's always truly a pleasure to have you on, buddy. As for the Galactic Core podcast, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube as well. All episodes uploaded on there. So go along, give us a subscribe. Get obviously some opinions going for some of our top scenes here. Whether you agree, if there's anything else that we've missed out on, but go on there, give us a follow, give us a like. Dave, tell us where the brand new logo for Why So Sidious can be seen.
Oh, we do. We got a nice little makeover we threw out there. You can see it over at TikTok, X, and Instagram. X always throws me off. It makes me slow down when I drop those. at Why So Sidious Pod, and you can find us on YouTube as well. Yeah, we're always dropping stuff on there, so go ahead and check us out. And Andy, thank you again. I have been on here quite a lot, and I hope to continue to be, and we can't wait to get you back on. Like you said, we got Tales of the Empire, we got Alkalite coming, so we got some Star Wars content we can be collabing on here, so we're going to have you back on soon. But thank you for having me on. As always, it was a blast.
Absolutely, man. I mean, you've got your own May the 4th special coming out, I believe, for Why So Sidious. So make sure that everyone out there, you're tuning into that. Tune into other episodes anyway. I don't want to harp on about how much I love you guys and your show because, you know, I've got a lot of love for the Why So Sidious crew, but it is my number one listened to podcast of 2024 so far. I've listened to
Honored.
Every episode that you guys have put out this year, more than any other show. Sorry, everyone else, but the Why So Sidious crew are killing it this year. You've got your ongoing box office draft, which is obviously going to be, keep an eye on that as we're going through the year. Any other big episodes coming up for you guys?
We just dropped our coverage of the Darth Bane trilogy review. So if you've read the Legend novels out there,
with JD's friend Cody.
Yes, sir, Cody. He's been a long time listener since we started up, and he just started busting out Star Wars novels. He got 17 over the last year, some insane thing like that. So we had him on. That was fun. We have our May 4th episode coming out where we cover the Gillen run of the Darth Vader series, and we also do a draft. 7 characters: Jedi, Sith, Bounty Hunter, Droid, Clone, Wild Card, and a ship for your team. We did that at the very end of it. So it was pretty fun. We just recorded that, so that'll be coming out soon. Yeah.
Amazing. Great stuff. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. I'm going to be doing a few different things in the coming months in terms of, because we've got obviously Acolyte coming out. I'm going to try and do a preview for that sometime the next month and maybe talk about what's good to catch up with that from the High Republic era before you get into the Acolyte. Obviously we've got The Boys coming out soon as well. Season 4, going to be covering that. Obviously Deadpool Wolverine on July 26th is going to be dropping. Going to have to get an episode in there quick because my damn baby's due at the beginning of August. So I've got a lot to cover through June and July, and then I'll be taking a break sort of after the baby's arrived. So lots to fit in before then, but make sure you all stay tuned. But until next time, everyone.
The Force will be with you, always.
Thanks for tuning in to the Galactic Core Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. But until next time, go get your geek on.